Over 40 years ago, a man by the name of Gary Davidson announced on October 7th, 1973, the creation of the World Football League. It was going to be a 12-team format that was set to kick off in July of 1974. Honestly, this seemed like the perfect time to compete with the NFL. In the spring of 1974, players were threatening to go on strikes due to disagreements with NFL owners. Even if it seemed small, this startup league had a fighting chance.
I'm Earl Harmon, and welcome to the new game in town, the World Football League. Last night at approximately 8:08 p.m., this football was kicked off in Orlando, Florida, launching the start of the WFL.
This league claimed it was going to take American football onto a worldwide stage, with their championship game being called the World Bowl. Yet, the furthest the WFL ever reached was placing a team in Hawaii. Get this, they were called the Hawaiians. I just thought some of these team names were odd. The Birmingham Americans, the Detroit Wheels, the Philadelphia Bell, and a variety of others. Oh look, the Houston Texans. Yeah, the modern NFL expansion team would later adopt the name. There's actually a few others that have stuck in other sports. The Charlotte Hornets, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Chicago Fire. There was quite a bit of differences between the World Football League and the NFL. Here are some of the differences. Overtime was divided into two halves of 7.5 minutes, each starting with a kickoff by one of the teams, which I personally think this is a better system than what the NFL has today. On the field, the WFL went with yellow footballs and flashy uniforms. The league also wanted to experiment with color-coded pants based on player positions. This never really took off, but that would have been something. At the end of the season, they presented the MVP with a cash prize of $10,000. They actually placed it on center field in $1 bills. But my favorite thing has to be what they used to measure first downs. Instead of sticks and chains, they used a device called a dicker rod. Apparently designed for convenience, the device was 2.5 yards long. It only needed one person to run it, instead of a full chain crew. Imagine a ball carrier gets tackled close to the first down, and the announcer's got to be like, "It looks to be real close, here comes out the dicker rod." Because finding 3 people to run a chain crew isn't all that difficult, sadly, the dicker rod never caught on. To build up the teams in the beginning, the league held a college draft. The first 6 rounds were held on January 22nd, 1974, with the remaining 30 rounds 2 weeks later. For a startup league, the WFL actually had excellent talent. A lot of dudes spent time in the NFL, whether it was before or after this league. Just to name a few, Alfred Jenkins became an all-pro receiver for the Falcons. Jack Dolbin started in a Super Bowl for the Broncos. In my last video, I mentioned Hall of Famer and reigning Super Bowl MVP Larry Zonka, and a few of his teammates played in the WFL. Zonka said he was getting paid $50K a year to play for the Dolphins, and when the WFL offered him $3.5 million over 2 years, he couldn't say no. Another Hall of Famer who joined the league was Ken Stabler. And you ever heard of Vince Papale from the movie Invincible? He actually got a start in the WFL and made the first catch in league history. To kick off the inaugural season, the WFL showed major promise. Early attendance numbers were actually very impressive. Celebrities were even showing up to games. Names like Burt Reynolds and Elvis Presley. The Philadelphia Bell pulled in 55,000 for their home opener, and over 64,000 for their second home game. But this turned out to be pseudo-success. The league found out later, the team had been lying about how many tickets they had sold. It turned out the team had only sold 13,000 in their first game and just over 5,000 in the second. They had just let thousands of people pour into the game for free. This ended up turning away investors and sponsors and completely ruining the league's credibility. This was probably the turning point of this league. There was a game later for the Bell that season where they only had 750 fans show up. Here's the truth about teams in the WFL. Several of the 12 teams paid way less than the original franchise fee required. This resulted in teams being completely underfunded and not being able to meet the most basic necessities. Here are some sad and harsh realities of some of these teams. Only 3 teams could even pay their players every week. The Florida Blazers lived off of McDonald's meal vouchers after not being paid for 3 months. The Portland Storm were reportedly being fed by sympathetic fans. When the Hornets couldn't pay their laundry bill, they had their jerseys impounded, so they couldn't play. The Detroit Wheels didn't have enough money to buy athletic tape. They ran out in the middle of a game. And luckily for them, there was a guy who donated enough for them to finish the game. There were multiple teams who relocated mid-season, one of them being Jacksonville, which was the team that was supposed to host the World Bowl. Due to this, they had to try and relocate the championship game, and the start of the playoffs didn't go much better. The Hornets, the second place team in the East, only sold 1,000 tickets for their first game, and due to not reaching financial requirements, dropped out of the postseason entirely. And what's supposed to be the climax of the season was truly mediocre at best, the World Bowl, between the Americans and the Blazers. Both teams hadn't been paid in weeks. The Americans almost didn't show up to the game until they were promised rings if they won. The stadium wasn't even half full. It was just not the most hyped up of games. The Americans ended up winning. And while they were celebrating on the field with their trophy, the sheriff's department was going through their locker room confiscating everything they could find. And literally right after their celebration, they had their uniforms repossessed to help pay off team debts. Somehow the league came back the next season and didn't show any improvement. Even though they had more NFL talent, they had less teams, and the league was just less relevant. And the WFL folded before the end of the season. Years later, with old stadiums left in ruins, in a last desperate attempt for a merger, the Memphis owner filed a lawsuit against the NFL arguing they had violated antitrust laws and should be allowed to be in the NFL. They didn't win the case. Ironically, with a league that wanted to be known for more than football in America and expand worldwide, their only champion ever would be a team with the nickname Americans.
I think the last 5 games we didn't get paid for. We continued to play with reservations.
Bad for some of the other kids. A lot of guys played for free. You know, it's a tough game to play for free.